Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko o hiniro te manga, ko timatuku te moana no tamakia hou. Ko tā rob toko papa, ko whenak toko whānau, ko isi toko wingua. Kia ora everyone and welcome to another Aotearoa Circle webinar. As some of you know, I am Izzy Fenwick, one of the guardians of the Circle in my role on the board as Emerging Director. I think we have a couple of other guardians here joining us today. There's too many of you entering the waiting room to see who's here, but I think our Simon Limmer and of course Vicky Robertson, if you're here, kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. This is such an important session today, and I know for many of you on the call, waiting for the release of the documents that we're going to be discussing this morning has felt like a long time coming, and what an incredible milestone to have them being released. So to start, I just want to thank everyone and anyone who had anything to do with either of the emissions reduction plan or adaptation plan. And a special thank you to MFE for taking us through them this morning when they are basically still steaming hot off the press. Kia ora for that. And Vicky Robertson, Secretary for the Environment and co-chair of the Circle, was going to be with me on this virtual stage today, but this week has contracted COVID. So I think she might still be tuning in. Kia ora, Vicky, if you are here already. But we have Janine Smith, Deputy Secretary, Natural and Built Systems and Climate Mitigation with us. Kia ora and welcome, Janine.
Kia ora.
And we will also be hearing from EECA's Group Manager, Investment and Engagement, Nicki Sutherland. Kia ora and welcome, Nicki.
Kia ora.
So for obvious reasons, we can't go through everything today. The emissions reduction plan alone is over 300 pages, but the Circle has worked with the team at MFE and EECA to select some of the really important and poignant areas of focus in regards to the kaupapa of the Circle. So that's where we're going to be focusing our time today. And without any further ado, we've got a lot of good content to get through today. I'm going to get started. So kia ora, Janine, take us away when you're ready.
Kia ora. Thank you, Izzy. And thank you for having me here this morning. Tēnei tātou katoa, ko Janine Smith, tōku ingoa, kei Manatū mo te Taiao o e mahi ana nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Unfortunately, as Izzy was saying, Vicky has come down with COVID, so you've got me this morning, but I'm very happy to talk you through the emissions reduction plan and the contents that were released on Monday. But before getting into that, I just want to really acknowledge Aotearoa Circle and the role that you have been playing in spearheading a lot of climate action across New Zealand. Just a couple of things to mention: the low carbon energy roadmap, the Centre for Sustainable Finance. These are all critical programs that have really been at the cutting edge of how we then move through into programs and policies around how do we reduce emissions. So kia ora to you all, and thank you for your contribution to that. Also, just notably, we've got a number of stakeholders on. I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for your input into the emissions reduction plan as well. We had over 10,000 submissions come in on the emissions reduction plan when it went out for consultation last year, and there was a significant contribution in working through all of those submissions, but also some of the private sector engagement that we had along the way and understanding what some of the barriers were to be able to reduce emissions more was really critical in that process too. So the nature of this presentation that we're going to go through today is just a few slides around what the content is of the emissions reduction plan, but also our climate adaptation pathway as well. So we will start there. We will share some slides if we could get that going, and then we could start to walk through some of that content. Kia ora, everybody. Hope everybody can see that. Just give me a quick thumbs up if you're...
Yep, we can see that. Thanks, Janine.
Awesome, fantastic. So we've got two key planks to our climate policy journey in New Zealand. One is around adapting to climate change impacts, and our other is reducing our emissions in terms of climate change mitigation. Climate adaptation is a critical importance to our work program in New Zealand. Even if we stopped emitting all our emissions today, we would still face climate change impacts in New Zealand. It's really consistently heard across the country the need to have consistent policies and programs in relation to how do we address climate change impacts in New Zealand. We're seeing the severity of weather events increase over the years, and it's really important that we have a national approach to how we address climate change impacts in New Zealand. In terms of the Zero Carbon Amendment Act, one of the critical parts of the Zero Carbon Amendment Act was actually the first product that came out of it was a climate change risk assessment. And off the back of that, being able to understand, well, how do we address those risks in New Zealand? And we're out for consultation at the moment on the National Adaptation Plan. And that is really to address a number of the risks that are presented within the climate change risk assessment, and really focuses on three key areas. The first being around reforming institutions, the second around data information and guidance, and the third around climate resilience across strategy and policy, and joining those up. So please feel free to put your submission in and contact us if you'd like to have more detailed conversations around what's contained within the National Adaptation Plan. But certainly we consider that this is a critical plank to our climate change policy architecture, and look forward to hearing what you have to say about it as we move into the next phase. The rest of the presentation, we're going to focus on the emissions reduction plan. So you would have seen the emissions reduction plan being launched on Monday. This is a significant part of New Zealand's climate change story. The Zero Carbon Act had 4 key pillars to it. This is the 4th key pillar of that Zero Carbon Amendment Act. That comes off the back of setting the emissions reduction targets to 2050, establishing an independent climate change commission to provide independent advice to the government around the climate change pathways, and setting the emissions budgets or the stepping stones to be able to get to those targets. The emissions reduction plan contains the programs and the policies to be able to meet the emissions budgets, and is an all-inclusive plan across the economy, which builds on some core principles that we have used in how we draw together those plans and policies. Really focusing on playing our part. How do we do that across New Zealand and across the economy? Empowering Māori to be able to work together with us in relation to the transition, and the Māori Climate Platform is a key part of that. An equitable transition, and ensuring that we all work together, and how do we address some of the impacts that come out as a result of the transition. Working with nature, and I'll come a wee bit more to that detail as we go through the presentation, and also creating a productive, inclusive economy. So just want to really focus on the working for nature element of the emissions reduction plan. This was a key distinction from what we went out and consulted on, and what our final plan contained. What we think is really critical is the nexus between climate change and also our biodiversity crisis. Those two are inextricably linked, and it's really important for us that we come out across government and ensuring that we have a joined up work program, both in relation to climate change, but also how do we address biodiversity, and focusing on nature-based solutions is one way to do that. They're cost effective, they're supported by nature, and they provide environmental, social and economic benefits. I also want to acknowledge the Aotearoa Circle in this regard, and spearheading a lot of this nature-based solutions in its own strategy and development as we push forward in our climate action as well. Another key part or enabling factor of the transition to a low emissions economy is ensuring that we have the right funding and financing settings around how do we transition. You would have seen also, in addition to the plan being released on Monday, were also the announcements in relation to the Climate Emergency Response Fund. This was established in 2021 and is a $4.5 billion from the emissions trading scheme, revenue recycled from that. 2.9 billion was drawn down from the SURF to fund the first tranche of initiatives that you would have seen coming through in the emissions reduction plan on Monday. This is a really critical element to ensure that we get the emissions reductions that are needed in order to be able to meet the budgets, particularly in this first emissions budget, and then also laying the foundations for the second and the third budgets as well. So then we move into some more of the sectorial based chapters which are contained with the emissions reduction plan. One of the critical parts of pulling together the emissions reduction plan has been working together across government with the various government agencies who are responsible for these particular sectors. underneath that, we've really gone back to what are our emissions reduction targets and ensuring that the budgets that are set underneath that align with the Climate Change Commission's advice, and focusing on what are the plans and policies that we need to put in place to be able to meet budgets. When we look at the likes of the energy and the transport sectors, it's really important that we get the emissions down within those sectors, particularly given the carbon dioxide emitting sectors. And when we look at the targets that we're trying to achieve in the long term, that's getting to net zero by 2050. So the core components associated with decarbonising the energy sector, and Nicki will come to this in some of her presentation as well, is really around how do we reduce coal in relation to our industrial heat. And you would have seen the expansion of the Giddy Fund, which Nicki will come to in her particular presentation as well. There are also other critical factors which are contained within the policies of the energy sector as well. Banning new coal boilers and complete phase out by 2037 is also a critical initiative which was contained within there as well. If we move on to other sectors that we've got within the emissions reduction plan, reducing emissions from agriculture is obviously another critical part of ensuring that we're transitioning to a low emissions economy. As part of this, you would have seen the announcements, particularly in relation to the SURF funding on the Agricultural Centre of Action, and ensuring that we have the technologies and the uptake of those technologies to ensure that there is emissions reduction technologies in relation to our agricultural emissions. That's a key part. When you go back to some of the advice that the Climate Change Commission gave us with regards to setting the 3 budgets over time, you will see that the first budget is for a shorter period of time. When you're looking at the second and the third budgets, they require much deeper emissions reduction cuts. And so what we're trying to do in the emissions reduction plan is providing a balance between the immediate emissions reductions that are needed in that first budget period, but also how do we set up some of the foundations in relation to the emissions reductions that are going to be needed in the second and the third budgets. And that's certainly the case in relation to agriculture as well, and the technology associated with that. There's also initiatives around the climate-based advisory services, and the plan also contains He Waka Ika Noa, which is a key part of the government's program in relation to agricultural emissions and working together with our partners on that. So decarbonising the transport sector, as I alluded to earlier, obviously the transport sector is a carbon dioxide emitting sector. And when you look back at the targets that have been set in the Zero Carbon Amendment Act, that's focusing on how do we get our long-lived gases down to net zero by 2050. Policies that were included with the transport sector is really around how do we reduce our reliance on cars, and looking at more mixed modes of transport. How do we support the uptake of EVs? So obviously the clean vehicle discount, social leasing schemes, and the infrastructure associated with that. And then also how do we lay the foundations to decarbonise our heavy transport and our freight within the transport sector as well. Finally, I just wanted to again acknowledge the Aotearoa Circle, but the role of the private sector and New Zealand society more broadly in helping to input into the emissions reduction plan, but also really working together as we move into the implementation of the plan. In some way, this is the completion of the first phase of the Zero Carbon Act in some way, but actually the hard work really now begins, and how do we make sure that we are actually implementing the policies that are contained within the plan, and how we do that collectively across government and the private sector and New Zealand society more broadly is really critical as we move into that next phase. So I'll pause there and I'll let Nicki talk you through some of her slides as well.
Tēnā koe Janine, tēnā koe Izzy, ko Nicki Sutherland, taku ingoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for extending the invitation to EECA today. And it is a wonderful feeling to be here on this side of the week to be able to share our good news with you. And we really do support the business community for the support that you've given us in making our ask for extended funding for a further rounds of goodies and to extend the program. A much easier task So thank you for that and for the welcome here today. I'm only going to take you through 3 slides, and what I want to do is move through the relationship between process heat and the ERP, and have a very quick look at what GIDI 1 achieved, and really focus on what GIDI 2 is looking like, to the extent that we can share that at the moment. So this first slide up here is just a quick run through to show you the relationship. Most of the audience will know that EECA's mandate is to make it easier for New Zealand businesses to choose clean energy and clever technology, and that we have a particular focus on process heat and energy efficiency. This is really a core swim lane for us. So this slide here shows the criticality of process heat, of energy, and then process heat as it fits in that ERP paradigm. You can see over on the left that energy makes up about 40% of New Zealand's emissions, of which process heat and stationary energy from business produce about 30%. Transport's 42%, and of course EECA also has a significant low emissions transport program. Over to the right, we've got another breakdown which shows the amount of fossil fuel generated process heat use that could be replaced right now with available low emissions technology. So this is quite a key principle that we really urge as being one of the core reasons for accelerating the change right now, and really trying to kickstart things. But the technology is there, it's largely the cost that's the barrier. We're also aware that ready technology is increasingly being deployed in this intermediate sector down the bottom, and up in the high temperature process heat space as well. There's quite a few promising technologies well progressing in R&D. All right, can we have the next slide, please? So this is showing you the outcomes of GIDI 1, and all of this information is up on our website. So all that I really want to say is that GIDI 1 was set up after many years of research and engagement with the business community, which really firmed in on the fact that cost was the significant barrier, and that there were available opportunities, which gave us the opportunity to pilot GIDI 1 and prove it was successful. And it was hugely successful. So projects from the first round of GIDI are estimated to save 7.4 million tonnes of CO2 over their lifetime, and that will contribute 7.87% of the government's first emissions budget, which is a great result. Got a head start. So if I go to the next slide, I think this is where we'll really focus now, looking at the expanded GIDI fund. So this is a visual and information that hasn't been presented publicly before. This is its first launch, and just to give you a breakdown of what the program looks like, you would have seen from the press release that it is 650 million over 4 years, comprising 350 million for an expanded GIDI, or government investment in decarbonising industry program. There's also 240 million in that 4-year period for a low emissions energy efficiency equipment program, and that's something completely new that people won't be familiar with. And there's 40 million for commercial buildings decarbonisation in the stationary and process heat space, largely stationary heat space. You also would have seen from the PR that the full amount's more of this. It's around about 970 million over 7 years, which takes us to the end of budget period 2. And again, to link back to the budget periods and the ERP, at EECA, we're setting a very ambitious target for ourselves. It's not an external target. It's a way that we're pushing ourselves to make sure that we're driving towards those abatement outcomes of achieving over 6 times the emissions reduction from GIDI 1, and we hope we get as close to that as possible. We're also taking care to make the funding accessible across as many businesses as possible, from large to small, and we're also looking at ways to help in both demand and supply. So in terms of the expanded GIDI, we're going to roll this out in stages, and you can see that in this visual here. The first stage is to launch the contestable funding rounds that you'll be familiar with for GIDI 1 for medium to large programs. And very happy to share that the first RFP for that will go live on the 9th of June. So this round of contestable funding will be purely for process heat related decarbonisation projects. And to be honest, the first round of funding is likely to be of most interest to businesses who've got their business cases ready to go and they know the capital gap that needs plugging to get those internal approvals. We do expect further funding rounds at around about the same regularity as we had for Giddy 1. So perhaps 4 a year. And we know that that's a program that will be regularly in place at those, likely to be at those increments. So the second row here is the support for small to medium energy projects, and this is where we're going to be focusing on low emissions, energy efficient technology. That's a new program. We're still in the design space. We know that this is going to be a key area for SMEs and the small businesses, and we're looking forward to designing that further and being able to launch it later on this year. The third row here is also something new, and this is an exciting opportunity to partner with large energy users who found themselves well outside the scope of Giddy 1 due to the size and complexity, meaning that they could neither come under the funding cap nor could they meet the really quick timeframes for getting projects together. So we're looking forward to developing some sophisticated, really effective partnerships with these large energy users and anticipate rolling that out or beginning that towards the end of this year as well. And then the final one is something that I'm particularly excited about given my background in energy transmission and distribution. And this is the extended mandate to invest in enabling infrastructure and address the barriers that are facing process heat users in this space outside the gate, which relates to their infrastructure, predominantly electricity, but also biomass. Again, this is a program that's in design and probably the last one to be rolled out. So what I would like to leave you with before we return back to Izzy with Q&A is to urge you to sign up to our newsletter so that you can be notified as these programs come online and be the first to receive our further information. Thank you.
Kia ora, Nicki, and kia ora, Janine. Thank you both for sharing with us this morning. We do have a few questions, and my first one, Janine, is for you. You know, as we know, MFE's involvement in something like this is so obvious as protectors and restorers of the environment of Papatūānuku, but this is a government-wide plan. So it'd be great to hear a little bit about what the interagency process was like and how that will change when it comes to actually implementing the ERP.
Thanks, Izzy. Great question. There has been a huge amount of involvement across agency on developing the plan. I think from memory we have around 17 government agencies who have docked into either developing up the policies, working together on the modelling, understanding what the impacts are. And I think that the critical piece in all of that is actually how do we come together across agencies and work through, well, what does this look like across the economy as opposed to just thinking about it in silo sectors. And that's a really important part, particularly as we think about the dynamic nature of the plan. It's not just a set and forget and ensuring that all of those policies are implemented. It will need to be dynamic. We'll need to keep working with it to ensure that results that are coming out of those policies and programs and working together across government is going to be critical in doing that. There has been a Climate Change Executive Board which is set across the top of the development of the emissions reduction plan, which has been a really critical part in bringing together senior levels of government agencies around that advice going up to ministers on the transition. That will then move into more of an implementation phase around interdepartmental agency board, which is a decision that the government has taken, which will be set up around the implementation of the ERP, and that will be chaired by the Prime Minister. As we move into the implementation of it, it will be particularly important. Also, how do we work together with the likes of the Climate Change Commission, who will be doing monitoring reports every year around how that progress is going as well.
Kia ora, Janine. Nicki, we've got a question for you coming through the channel. how do we define what large energy user is within the Giddy Fund?
I don't think that we need to define it at the moment. There's quite a clear list of New Zealand's top or largest energy users and emitters, which I think is called the top 100. You won't be surprised to know that changes all the time. But obviously what we'll do is to always look at partnership opportunities that will provide real impact and are worthwhile to progress. But what would be, I think what would be the most useful trigger to tip you into a partnership rather than a purely a Giddy project is if there's a clear portfolio of potential activity which could be worked through in a coherent plan where that would make sense.
And Nicki, you talked a little bit in your presentation about funding accessibility for businesses. What exactly does that look like, and what should businesses do if they do want to get involved or they do want to apply for funding?
Well, at the moment, what I've encouraged businesses to do is keep an eye on the website. There is information up on the website already relating to the RFP, so the contestable funding round. It's not all the information that you want. All the information that you'll be wanting to see, whether you're eligible for that or not, will be put up on the website on the 9th of June. But what I can say at the moment is that the scope for that RFP is for projects that achieve valuable emission savings. They must be decarbonising process heat. There's a minimum project size of 300k, and you must be operational by the end of 2025. So as with Giddy One, it's open to all New Zealand-based and NZBM registered private sector businesses. Other things around the fund that are still the same that will be useful for people to know that we still only fund the increment, the difference between the fossil fuel and the green alternatives. The Crown portion will still be capped at 50%, and the core assessment criteria will be relatively similar. So still focused on abatement, of course. Speed, because speed actually goes to abatement gains. Value for government's spend, and the applicant's own contribution. Two things that I would call out that we know are different this time: lowering that floor to 300k. So that's the total project size. That's not just of the Crown's contribution through EECA. And for all of these contestable rounds, including the first one, the cap was lifted. There's no cap. So previously it was 5 million, no cap. So if you're a large energy user with a huge project, but it's a discrete project that could be funded through this, then by all means, if you're ready, we'd love to talk to you. And if it's ready, but it's not, doesn't quite have the information that means it can be assessed and compared to the other projects, then we'll just start working with you right now. That would be great.
And you mentioned the next RFP will be launched on the 9th of June. What exactly is in scope for that?
I think I just summarised what was in scope. So decarbonising process heat, your 300k, end of 2025, and of course there must be emission savings. You'd actually be surprised how many times we get applications for projects that have a neutral emissions outcome. So that's absolutely key.
Kia ora. Got another question coming through for you, Nicki. There's lots of focus on industrial heat, and we've seen massive appetite for this within the industry. How can the SSDF move on quickly to achieve the same sort of scale of delivery?
Yeah, the SSDF is actually within my portfolio as well, and it's so often overlooked. It's a $220 million fund, but it is working in a market that is one of the most complex markets in New Zealand. And if you take DHBs, for example, who are they're really quite a large group of emitters. The issues that DHBs have had to deal with in the past few years have just been so challenging. Their equipment is complex. It's integrated within all of the infrastructure makeup of their buildings, and so to make some of these changes require systems to be shut down. You can only do that at certain times of year. It's incredibly complex. We've also got the DHBs in structural change. And that's just one example, but that's actually the case across a lot of the public sector. We've made really huge gains. What we've done in partnership with the public sector is first, we've helped them to develop a process heat decarbonisation and stationary heat decarbonisation roadmap so that they can see their options. And now we need to work with them to see when they can implement those options. And unfortunately, it's not as straightforward as we'd all like it to be.
Got a question coming in from Matthew Walker, which I think is building on that a little bit. And he asked, what opportunity is being taken to encourage the assessment of energy efficiency opportunities within businesses when converting process heat?
And absolutely, it's great to have that question, because we do quite a lot of work with Transpar and with the EDBs who, as Janine referenced before, in terms of your cross-organisation collaboration, that work is absolutely vital to get such a good picture of the challenges ahead and what we need to work together on. And I think you might have to pull me back to the question because I've just got excited about the collaboration.
What opportunity is being taken to encourage that assessment of energy efficiency opportunities for businesses when converting the heat?
Absolutely. So quite often you will see reports on the scale of the electrification need and the generation that will be needed to meet that need. And quite often those reports do not actually take into account the opportunity for energy efficiency first and demand reduction first. So that's one thing. So by tackling that, we can actually have a much more accurate picture of what is needed. And that's when we move into that enabling infrastructure space, because that is a key barrier. Secondly, EECA actually played in the energy efficiency space first. Carbon's been relatively new for us. So we're experts or key sold on energy efficiency. One of our flagship programs has been our Energy Transition Accelerator program, which is like a decarbonisation plan for an individual business. And what that does is look at all of your environment, look at your issues, and then develop a plan based on the solutions that are technologically and economically feasible for you. And energy efficiency comes first 100% of the time. What we're finding is that businesses can often reduce their energy requirement by 20 to 25% by going through that. That not only reduces the requirement for energy, reduces their costs clearly, but it also opens up a whole array of other technology solutions. But quite often we're finding this, especially with the SSDF schools, means that you no longer necessarily need network connection. You might be able to use heat pumps as your solution, which anytime you avoid network connection, it's a lot cheaper and it's better for all the other network users in your region, better for New Zealand Inc. So 100% on board, and thanks for the opportunity to sell that.
Nicki, sort of building on that a little bit, I've got a question in here that's really talking about the opportunities for smaller businesses. And I'm wondering, in that accelerator program as an example, so how much of some of the projected GIDI or other equa funding opportunities like that are available for those smaller businesses who are trying to convert or transition?
Look, small businesses are a bit of a challenge for the reason that government, EECA, MFE, all of us are incredibly stretched. We've got small teams and we're focused on these abatement outcomes. So when we look at the small business community, which is enormous, it's 98% of New Zealand businesses or something like that, it's huge. But it's very difficult to reach those in a way that's administratively efficient. And so we approach it a couple of ways. First, we've got the GenLess program, and we've got an awful lot of information up on our website so that we can share that information with small businesses who don't even know where to start and what to tackle first. I would shout out the SBC toolkit work that a number of the agencies that we partnered on together to support, and that's just a great resource for small businesses. In terms of EECA funding, we have made the effort to lower the cap for GIDI so that we can work with them on a one-on-one basis in that contestable round. But really the big opportunity is going to be in this energy efficient, low emission technology. And at the moment we are researching and not too far off launching our program for that, which we think will be quite a straightforward application and claims process to encourage uptake of that innovative technology. And it could be electric motors, it could be electric heat pumps, but it'll be quite a homogenous process because that's the only way that we can operate and achieve this.
Kia ora. And as I was remotely involved in that climate toolbox as well, so just want to mihi to Sustainable Business Network. That's some great work, and mihi to you as well, Phil. I know you're on the call.
Yes, SBN, apologise for that.
Question from the West Tong is around carbon abatement. So is carbon abatement cost of the grant and or overall project a key KPI for EECA when prioritising which projects to award funds to?
100%. We calculate the marginal abatement cost to government. We calculate the marginal abatement cost of the project as a whole, and we prioritise projects on that basis. And we're hoping that with the first RFP as well, we can proactively set out a range of what we think is a reasonable window, where if projects are outside that window, then they should not waste their time applying. So in round one of GIDI, the marginal abatement cost to government, so the dollars per tonne was $12.29, really good. Round two, about 18, round four, round three, about 24, so it's an average cost of about 16. We are expecting that to go up because we know that there were quite a lot of low-hanging fruit that got dealt with initially, but 100%.
Kia ora. Kind of, I guess, building on that a little bit more, there's a question here that I guess is asking for what is your comment or response to some of the commentators that decry that the GIDI fund is corporate welfare? And what's your response to that? Why is the approach of grants required as well as the ETS lever?
Because it's a great question, and it's actually quite hard to answer that question when you are a public sector official and you've got all these obligations of the dialogue that you can enter into and the parameters within which you need to operate. But I would say a couple of things. One is that all of the data that we have in EECA, it's always real data, and shows that if there's not further intervention, if the ETS is left to play its current role, then we'll have people decarbonising far too late. And so we have graphs from the information that show people targeting 2050, 2037, when the coal boiler ban comes in that Janine referenced. And we actually need it right now. So every year of carbon abatement assists the budget. And in fact, every quarter within the year for some of these large projects can be a huge abatement outcome. We are told, we see economic commentators who will reference that the ETS needs to hit over $100 to make switching to biomass economic, over $180 to make switching to electricity economic. And it's also not just about finance, there's many other barriers as well that need extra assistance to tip businesses into the space where they make the decision.
I think one of the other challenges, Nicki, is also popping up as a question here, and that's, when it comes to that speed one of the challenges is a shortage of technical and delivery expertise in New Zealand. And the question here is around sort of what is EECA doing to grow that expertise and decarbonisation across New Zealand?
A great question, and one of the really, really key barriers, and we even face it at EECA. We've got a number of roles advertised at the moment, which are super exciting, work with amazing people, great boss, bits of interest, get in touch. But we are doing a few things here. So we really value our partnership with CEP, Carbon Energy Professionals, and we support them financially and in any other ways we can as well to pull more people into the industry through that. We support BANZ, Biomass Association of New Zealand. We again supporting it to increase its membership, to improve the competency of the consultants out there in the biomass space. And we've also got a new partnership with Lumo 364, which we're really excited about, which is a very innovative platform based in Christchurch but nationwide, which is has identified an opportunity for the energy industry to increase its capability from within. So not only encourage more people to the space, but to grow the capability of all of us in it and share the lessons by connecting experts with each other. So I encourage people to look out for that as well.
One of the things I'm personally really passionate about is growing the capability of our rangatahi for the world that we're going to live in the future. And I think this really talks to that, some of those like technical requirements of a reality where a focus on decarbonisation is going to be critical. But I think actually also, Janine, circling back to some of that nature-based solutions and, connection with nature almost needs to be built into how we prepare our rangatahi for the future. And I'm wondering if that is something that MFE are really kind of thinking about when they make plans and implementation like this.
Absolutely. That's one of the key parts of as we come to build the work program, particularly around the nexus of climate change and how do we reduce emissions and adapt to the impacts of climate change, and also our biodiversity crisis, and how we join those two together and really working together with the youth of New Zealand to understand what's important for them, but also how we can get involved in actually getting really practical and action on the ground as well. So that's a key part of how we build in our program over time as well. Great question.
I've got questions coming in hard and fast in the chat, and I'm conscious of time. So if I don't get to your question, we will send some of these questions through to Nicki and Janine, and we might get a bit of a summary to send out to the group of you who have attended, because I'm conscious there are some awesome questions in here and I'm not going to make all of them. But there's a question in here that I love. William thought there's been a lot of sort of commentary around the mostly carrot approach in some of these sort of plans, and do we feel that the stick approach is less suitable? Are we starting with a carrot and there's going to be sticks later? How does that balancing of carrot and sticks come into the process?
There are absolutely sticks, and I'm an ex-electricity regulation lawyer and environmental lawyer back in the day. So regulation, always regulation, the stick goes hand in hand with the carrot. So it's a really well-known precept that you don't just launch regulation and launch a penalty without first having a warm-up period where you create some carrots so that you can show the industry what it needs to do and try and get them to start doing it. Because that's the only way to be fair, isn't it? So we've got the stick around the coal boiler ban, and I think it's so wonderful that has been rolled out through the RMA process, because I'm sure that there are a number of options on the policymakers space, but to have that delivered through the means of having your inability to get future consent or to renew your consent is a really strong stick. EECA has a very strong regulation department, and we are working on expanding our regulatory scope and our regulatory ability. within the scope that we have, we do occasionally prosecute people. We've done that before in the equipment space, and so I agree with you, but it's an area in which we need to move hand in hand, both carrots and sticks. If I just want to make one more comment too, if we run out of time, EECA's running a series of webinars, 4 webinars on all of this in quite a lot of detail next week. So if you do register on our website, then you can get an invitation to those as well if you feel you want more information.
Kia ora, Nicki. I love that conversation about carrots and sticks, and sometimes I find in these circles where we are kind of preaching to the converted, which a lot of us on this call are, we want more sticks. But, you know, this emission reduction plan is for everyone, and there's a lot of people that are going to need some serious carrots. So I think those of us who want to see the sticks want to see them big, but I fully hear you that the carrot is going to help the non-converted to get to that point as well.
Can I just make one more point on that too, that if economic productivity is really important to all of us, then the last thing that we want is everybody switching at the same time.
Yeah.
And so we need to ensure that we work together so that there's a streamlined, smooth transition at a time frame that doesn't blow out the consulting sector, doesn't blow out the contractors, the supply chains, etc. So very compelling reason to have the carrot on that basis.
Totally. And I think building on that in terms of not wanting everyone to transition at the same time, and not everyone is going to be able to. The last question I've got from Robert is really looking at supporting fair, equitable, and inclusive transition. So he asks, how are these key instruments being implemented to ensure that they are driving down emissions in a way that is fair and equitable and inclusive? And if there's anything that either of you want to comment on that before I start to wrap us up.
Thanks, Izzy, and that's a really excellent question. I think one of the key components of the advice that came in from the Climate Change Commission to the government was ensuring that there was an equitable transition associated with meeting the budgets. And one of the key actions that is contained within the emissions reduction plan is an equitable transition strategy. And that's really focused on 5 key areas. The first is around seizing the opportunities of the transition. So thinking around what the employment opportunities could look like there, being proactive in planning for the transition, looking at enabling a transition for all. So this is understanding, well, what are those impacts going to look like as we roll out the policies, and ensuring that those impacts are well managed. Building an evidence base of the impact. So this is again talking to that point around being dynamic and understanding how that is playing out on the ground, and being able to adjust as we go, and enabling informed public participation. So again, the whole premise of the Zero Carbon Amendment Act is focused on transparency, ensuring that there is clarity around what are the policies and programs to be able to meet the budgets, but also how we support New Zealanders in being able to get there as well. So that's a key plank of the equitable transition strategy too. That's being led by MB and as part of the Just Transitions program as well.
Kia ora. That's all we have time for today. Thank you all so much for joining us on this Friday morning. Thank you so much, Nicki and Janine, for being here to share your mahi and your kaupapa today, and for everything that has gone into where we've got to. So kia ora, and thank you so much for that. Just want to encourage everyone to take Nicki up on joining any of those webinars and signing up for the EECA newsletter. I know that there's going to be a lot more coming through that, so I encourage you to do that, and to keep an eye out for a follow-up email from the Aotearoa Circle for any of the questions that I didn't get to, because I know that there were some awesome questions in there, and for future webinars from the Aotearoa Circle. So thank you all again for your time today, and I hope you have a beautiful weekend. Ka kite.